I'm really inspired to be sharing an interview I have conducted with Nicholas Charles, the author of the #1 Amazon bestseller, Family Prosperity. Interestingly, a lot of people have preconceptions about what that means. One of the most important issues that Nicholas addresses in writing this book is a damning statistic which goes back through history, which is that 90% of wealthy families lose all of their wealth within 3 generations. And what Nicholas has found out is that there are some fundamental causes behind that. And if you want your family to be in the 10%, he's identified 4 fundamental components that need to be in place. If those 4 components aren't in place, then you're essentially, no matter how much wealth you give your children, and we're not just obviously talking about financial wealth here, we're talking about health wealth, relationship wealth, intellectual wealth, business wealth. There's a lot of other forms of wealth. But no matter what you're leaving to your children or whatever you've created yourself, your children are essentially going to be gambling with it like going to a roulette wheel, unless they have these 4 components in place. So no matter how many roulette chips, to use that metaphor, you're giving your children, they're still going to a roulette table unless you put these 4 components in place. And that's what the book is about, that's what the interview is about, and I'm really looking forward to you hearing this and getting your feedback. So hello Nicholas, it's
Hi,
great to
Alistair.
meet you. Yeah, looking forward to interviewing you about your book, The 4 Fundamentals of Family Prosperity. And wow, what a journey for you that's been in writing it. Just from reading the book, I can tell. And one of the things that really strikes me, one of the facts that seems to be the foundation of what the book's about, is the statistic that 90% of wealthy families lose all their wealth within 3 generations. Wow, I mean that's a pretty interesting statistic. So yeah, what I'm most interested in is, how did you come about with that statistic and your own personal story? How did that all come about and end up in you writing this book and providing this family prosperity service that you now provide?
Yeah, it's a pretty damning statistic, and but the reason why I was fascinated by all this is because of my own personal story, as well as it being a great business opportunity, and we'll talk about that later. But essentially, this whole 90% of families, well, more than 90% of families lose their wealth, termed the phrase shirt sleeve to shirt sleeves within 3 generations, because essentially the first generation will make it. If there's again a 70% chance of it all going by the time within 2 generations, so i.e. your children will lose all the money that you've created. But if it does survive 2 generations, then there's a more than 90% chance that the 3rd generation will lose it. And you can see that even in society. Look up Forbes' rich list. Over 70% of wealth today, we're in 2020, and how long has wealth been around for? How many thousands of years has wealth been around for? Yet over 70% of the wealth is held by 1st generation. It's a frightening statistic. So in terms of my personal story, I was part of the cycle of shirt sleeve to shirt sleeves within 3 generations. So my father should have been 3rd generation wealth, ended up becoming 1st generation because his father lost it all. So by the time my father was, so my great grandfather, I've got to get the greats in there. So my great grandfather was a millionaire in his own right. But by the time my father was 8 years of age, he lost it all. It was all gone. The money had all gone. And so my father came to this country with literally nothing, and created his own wealth from scratch. And created he studied, became a qualified accountant, created his own accountancy practice, and built a portfolio. When he relayed this story to me, my thoughts immediately went to fear, because essentially I was like, goodness, I am due to lose everything, because that's the cycle of my own family, thinking that it was unique to my own family.
Mm.
I then had done the research and realized it's not unique to my family. It's not unique at all, because all families globally suffer from this horrendous fact that the money dissipates within 2 to 3 generations. So that got me interested and focused in terms of, well, why does this happen? What are the real reasons why families lose all their wealth? So I ended up inevitably doing my own research and realized initially, my understanding was, oh, it must be because of poor financial planning. Maybe it's because of poor tax planning. Because if you look at the world's, the professional bodies that are out there, the lawyers, the IFAs, the accountants, the tax advisors, etc., this is what they focus on. They focus on world-class tax planning, great financial planning, estate planning, wills, trusts, etc. So, and this has come a long way over the last, 50 years. Yet the stats are still there. So clearly this isn't the reason. So I delved even deeper. What are families lose their wealth? And I uncovered that the number one reason why families lose their wealth, and check this, number one reason is because of poor communication. Poor communication will lead to distrust within the family, and distrust within the family leads to emotional conflict. And emotional conflict eventually causes the inevitable the implosion, shall I say, of your family. And again, it goes back to what Warren Buffett said, is that if you can't control your emotions, never expect to control money. And the same thing applies to families. And by the way, this research is highlighted in my book. It comes from Vic Prizer and Roy Williams. They're basically researchers in the United States, and they looked at 3,250 families over a 25-year period to uncover the real reasons. 60% of those families failed financially because of poor communication and lack of trust. Wow. Then I looked in more detail. Okay, what's the other reason? So 60%, and it was 25% failed because of a lack of poor communication for the next benefit, for the next generation. Preparing your heirs to receive the wealth. And you see this time and time again, whereby great estate planning, great tax planning gives, makes the money being passed out in an efficient manner. But if you're not prepared to receive the wealth, then that becomes a very, very dangerous thing to have. I tell all my clients, and I tell people when I go on stage, I go, can you imagine, think back when you're 18 years of age, what were your experiences? What did you know about money? Relatively nothing. And all of a sudden, some trustee that you've never met before in your entire life gives you a check for £1 million or 10 million, whatever it is, a huge amount of money. What are you going to do with it?
Yeah, it's a bit like, like lottery winners, isn't it? You hear lots of stories. I think there's some stat that 70% of them after 15 years have become bankrupt or something. 70%. It's a high number that I've certainly heard. So I guess it's the same sort of thing where if you just give people a load of money and they're not ready for it, they're going to blow it.
Correct. And you see it, and it's not just having a lot of money, it's also within family business. If you're not preparing the next generation to take over the family business, just because they're your bloodline doesn't make them the right person to take over the business. And yet, that it's even been coined, it's called nepotism, essentially, by, the fact that, you use your son or your next generation to take over the business is actually very destructive for that family business. And that again, that's a damning stat. You see it time and time again. I see it within my accountancy world, as well as speaking to multiple professionals, that this is a major problem. And again, so we've gone to 60%, 25%, and 10% of families failed because of essentially a lack of vision. Creating a vision that generates purpose greater than the individual needs of each family member, and 5% are for other reasons. Now, if you look at, so you got a problem, the loss of wealth over multiple generations. The cause is 95% because of poor communication, lack of preparing the heirs, and a lack of purposeful vision for the wealth in itself. And then you look at who out there at the moment today helps families overcome that particular problem. And you struggle to find them. I mean, I struggle to find them. I'm like, who's out there to make these strategic decisions, or to help families make these strategic decisions, help them, encourage them to have effective communication, help prepare the heirs either to receive the wealth or to mentor them within the family business? And who's there to help them facilitate and create a vision, create the individual needs of each family member? I mean, forget, so you've got essentially 99.9% of the professional world out there focuses on a problem that's only 5% of the cause.
Yeah.
And that to me was just a frightening aspect. And it made me realize that, oh my goodness, I need to go out there and not only communicate this as a problem for many families, but also create a service product that helps families resolve that 95% issue.
So, I mean, I guess a lot of people listening to this will be wondering, what are the kind of solutions? I mean, so the four fundamentals are, obviously number one is communication, for example. What kind of solutions would you have to address that one that you might want to share here? What kind of approach would you have?
So the one thing we communicate more than anything else is the problem. So what I've realized with a lot of high net worth families and wealthy families in general is they don't understand or appreciate the problem. So the issue that I had wasn't focusing on the solution, it was actually focusing on communicating the problem to get people to realize what the real problems are to their wealth. And the problem is you got to go for the the emotional heartstrings, shall I say. No family that I've ever met has the intention to leave a lasting legacy of their children destroying the wealth, having an addictive problem with its drugs, gambling, or alcohol abuse, or even or just as bad, destroying the business they've worked for 40, 50, 60 years to create and build. Well, I tell them, well, guess what? That's the legacy you're going to leave. Because if you don't put anything in place, you're leaving it to chance.
Yeah.
You're gambling with the legacy, your wealth legacy. And again, wealth, fascinating topic, because when you talk about wealth generally, what is wealth? And wealth in its sense, everyone understands financial wealth. So financial wealth is really straightforward. It's your assets, it's your money, it's your shares, property, real estate, etc. So everyone's appreciative of what financial wealth is. But what else is there? What else is the wealth? Well, what about the human intellectual capital, the stories, the experiences, the expertise behind the wealth? Mother's story, father's story. How was the money created? How was the business created? What did it take to create all that? What was it like not having money? Again, communicating that to create essentially an understanding of where this money has come from, an understanding and appreciation of the wealth, an appreciation of the family history. That needs to be passed down. That is wealth. That is real wealth. You need to combine the human intellectual capital with the financial capital and ensure that that's passed down in an effective manner from generation to generation.
Yeah.
So I'm going back, sorry, it's a bit of a long-winded method of answering your question, Alistair, there. So going back to what we essentially do, once we've effectively communicated the problem and essentially filtered the families that actually want to do something about it, the number one thing, the first thing we focus on is creating effective lines of communication within the family members.
Yeah.
That's really, really important, because one of the biggest problems that we found is something I call normalcy bias. So normalcy bias is when everyone steps back and assumes that because everything's okay today, everything will always be okay. And I'll give you a real example of what happened with my particular client that I spent the last 5 years dealing with their messes, where essentially it was mother and father. Father was an entrepreneur, came to this country, I think in the 60s, built multi-million pound business, multiple businesses actually. He had real estate business. He had he had cafeterias, restaurants, etc. He had multiple businesses spread between Cyprus and the UK. And everything was great when he was alive, when mother and father were alive. Tragically, mother passed away first. But again, father was the main entrepreneur and he controlled everything and made sure that his two children were looked after. The problem came though when father passed away. When father passed away, it caused a huge vacuum, because you had your two siblings who, when father was alive, everything was great. When father passed, the elder son, who was the entrepreneur, successful in his own right, classic second generation who understood and appreciated wealth and actually built wealth even greater than his father. But then you had the daughter, who was left with a lot of wealth, had no financial understanding, never really worked a day in her life, I would say, who was always the princess of the family and was expected to be looked after by her brother. That was her expectation. And this was communicated, by the way, at the funeral of their father. And her expectation was, my brother's going to look after me forever and ever, and everything's going to be great. The reality was completely different. At some stage, brother, which must have been built over many years. Again, I wasn't there when father was alive. I took over when the mess was created. But the mess was caused by the fact that when father passed away, created a vacuum, and brother thought there'd be a great idea for him, the entrepreneur, the hard-working person, to take all of the assets away from his sister. And what did that create? Not only did it create huge emotional turmoil, but inevitably ended up in a very expensive, very painful litigation battle that has literally taken me, I came on board to help the sister. It took me 5 years and lots of money. I'm not going to obviously explain how much money, but it was in the multiple millions to resolve this problem. And what I'm trying to communicate out there is that the cure is significantly more expensive than avoiding the problem. And it's a classic example of normality bias. If I was alive, everything was great, no problems. But just because it's okay today doesn't mean you should fail to plan for tomorrow.
Yeah.
And that's the issue that I have. Successful families, such as the Hall family, which is the longest the eldest banking dynasty on the planet, over 160 years old, they plan for the future. They understand what needs to be implemented in order to create successful legacies to their wealth. Unfortunately, they're in the minority.
Yeah. So, looking at the 4 fundamentals that are in the book, and obviously people will get more depth when they get the book and read through them. But I think, as you go through them, the one around, obviously 60% is the biggest one, is communication, effective communication. But then the other ones are quite significant, and without all 4 of them in place, actually you're not going to be in those 10% of families that do prosper for multiple generations. So in other words, to be in that 10%, you actually need all 4 of these in place, don't you?
It's essential. I mean, it's absolutely essential. But you can't have. So you like for example, when you build a house, you start with the foundations. You never start with the roof. It's absolutely pointless. Very, very. The houses that survive for many years, for hundreds of years, are the ones with the strongest foundations. The foundation to multi-generational wealth is communication. You can't build the other platforms, you can't build the other layers without solid communication which sits at the bottom. Yeah. So what we try and explain to our clients is, first we get them to realize what the problem is. So we do an in-depth risk analysis, which, by the way, there is a risk assessment on our website, which anyone can access for free on our link, which is familyprosperity.com. So we explain to them the current risks to their wealth, so they understand and appreciate that. Then what we do is we say, okay, you know where you are today. We then work on creating vision. Again, that's the 10%. Where do you want to be tomorrow? Where do you see the future of this family? Where do you see the wealth, the future of the wealth of this family? What do you want to do? What do you want to change? What do you want to create? So again, creating a purpose greater than the individual needs of each member. And philanthropy, which is the third aspect of the 4 fundamentals, is heavily linked to vision.
Yeah.
It clutches at the heartstrings. What do we want? Why do we want to make this money work? Why do we want to make this money last for multiple generations? What's the reason? And sustainable philanthropy is a core aspect of that. So we make sure they're crystal clear on where they are today, where they want to be tomorrow, and we create the stepping stones to ensure that they get there.
Yeah, again, to reassure to reiterate what you've just said, with sustainable philanthropy, for example, there doesn't appear to be any of the families that have been identified that have sustained wealth for multiple generations. Every single one of them, without exception, has sustainable philanthropy at the core of what the family does.
Correct. And even today, you've got the Walton family. I think they've got over, a couple of billion, in which they've saved over for sustainable philanthropic activities. The Rockefeller have got their very exclusive foundation, again spending lots of money on philanthropic activities. You've got the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. I mean, there's loads of examples out there of wealthy families creating their own foundations to help, create sustainable philanthropy.
Yeah, and I guess, I mean, obviously you're talking about a lot of these families because they're very well known, so people can relate to them.
Yeah.
But obviously, even a family with, not even multiple millions, with, just a few 100,000 in wealth, the same principles are true, aren't they? You could apply these principles no matter how financially wealthy a family was, to sustain, not just the financial wealth, but all aspects of wealth of the family.
Yeah, no, again, this applies to any family, where any family with an element of wealth to them. I'm giving you examples, like you said, because everyone knows, it's easy to read up about the Rockefellers and the Waltons and the Hall family, etc. They're there on Google, but this is applicable to every family. Every family that wants to leave a lasting legacy that survives for multiple generations needs to implement the four fundamentals. And sustainable philanthropy is an element. And what I mean by sustainable philanthropy, I'm not talking about a small direct debit to a charity, because that doesn't mean anything. I'm talking about creating something, whether it's your own foundation, i.e. whether you want to actually do the charitable work yourself, because you can actually donate time as well as money, or whether it's literally a foundation where you collect money and then you donate that money to multiple charities that inspire you, that you want to help out. So there's loads of options out there, but of course it is very important. I mean, I'm now working very closely with a charity, and behind the charity is a very successful business. And the funny thing, I mean, it's not funny, but it's closely linked. Having a sustainable philanthropic arm provides goodwill, which inevitably creates goodwill for your business. So having that, so it's not the real reason why you should do it, but you will have, you will have follow through effects on your business, because you're going to create massive amounts of goodwill through your through your charitable work.
Okay, great. The other like fourth component, which is kind of an interesting one, is aligned professional services. And
Yeah.
what's your experience? Because obviously you've come from a professional service background yourself. What's your experience about what happens there that families might not necessarily get right?
Well, I find it staggering that professional advisors don't talk to each other. That's the biggest problem. This is me not speaking with actually families, it's actually me speaking with professional advisors. So I regularly network with lawyers, financial advisors, other accountants, tax advisors, trustees, and I ask them the same question: do you know who the other family advisors are? And they say no, they don't know. They may know of them, but they never speak to them, they never communicate with them, they never discuss what is the needs and requirements of the family. I find that staggering. I mean, how can you provide a full-on strategic service to your client without speaking to their advisors, and without having a relationship with their advisors? So you can have, I'll give you a really, really simple example. So you go to your lawyer and you say, I need, great. Now, what your lawyer should be doing is he should be saying, okay, let's speak with your tax advisor to make sure that whatever will that we create for you and your family is tax efficient. A really simple example that doesn't happen.
Mm.
So one of the things that we do is we create what is known as an AGM of advisors, an annual general meeting, whereby the family will be present, or the families, when I say the family's representatives, will be certain members of the family who want to take on this responsibility and have an interest. That's the key word as well. Have an interest in speaking with the family's advisors. And at this board meeting, we have every single advisor for that particular family. And we representing the family, communicate the family's vision to the advisors and ask them a very simple question: what are you doing today to ensure that the family's vision is being met? And it goes back to that word communication, Alistair. It encourages communication, but in this aspect, it's not amongst the family members, it's actually between the family members and their advisors, to make sure that the advisors are actually doing what the family requires, and it's aligned with the family's wishes and their vision. And I hate to say it, I'm a qualified accountant. As professional advisors, this is not happening.
Yeah. And I find, a lot of families, I mean, I've asked a few in my time about their legacy vision. the vision of their legacy, and a lot of people don't really have a very good answer to that. And I guess so one of your services is to help them come up with an answer to that, and to have a
It's amazing. You speak to families about the vision for their wealth, and they sort of twist their head and they look at you like that's, and you could tell they've never even thought about it. Never mind not giving you a proper answer, they haven't even considered it.
Yeah.
And I relay the work that we do to almost like the traditional business model. When I explain this to families, and I explain this usually to the head of the family, I say, well, you've got a successful business. And I'm like, yeah, of course we have a very successful business. Oh, okay, great. Does your business have a vision? Well, of course we do. We want to do X, Y, Z, whatever the vision is, and they can roll it out to me. That's why they're successful. Great, I tell them. Do you have a board of advisors? And they look at me like I'm insane. Well, of course we have a board of directors. Of course we have a board of directors. Great. And do they each have their own roles and responsibilities? And of course they do. We have a sales and marketing director. We have a COO, a CEO, and everyone knows what they're doing. Great. Do you meet up regularly to speak to each other? Well, of course we do. And what do you discuss? The vision of the business. That's great, I tell them. Okay, your family is worth X, and you've got no structures, no responsibilities among your family members, no vision. What's the likelihood of your family succeeding for multiple generations? And that's when they say, you don't leave it to luck for your business. Your business is successful for a reason, because you've implemented structures. You've got structures, and you implement those structures, and you have effective communication regularly to make sure the business achieves its vision. So why don't you apply exactly the same thing that you're doing with your business to your family? Because your family, with the amount of money that it's worth, is a business in its own right. And we coin that the business of being a family. And we help them implement that.
Okay, awesome. So if people want to know more about this, and I'm sure a lot of people will, obviously there's the book,
Yes.
the 4 Fundamentals of Family Prosperity. And I understand you mentioned earlier about there being a complimentary assessment that people could.
Correct. So we would encourage anyone who wants to know more about this actually visit our website. There's loads of information there. So that's www.familyprosperity.com. And on that website, we give out a free assessment. It's a simple click, 8 yes or no questions, similar questions to what's in the book. So you can actually do it on the book. But if you do it online, you'll get a free report, instant report that's emailed to you with a copy of the questions and how you answered them. And it basically explains to you, the problems that your family currently faces. So that's completely free. It's a very basic model of what we do. We do a much more detailed risk assessment. We really answer some very, very detailed. We ask very detailed questions and create a report for families who want to work with us. But it's all about knowing where you are today, Alistair. Yeah. You don't know where you're going tomorrow unless you know where you are today. It's pointless working out what the solution is. Work out where you are today. That's the starting point. Where are you today? And then we work out where do you want to be in the future. And then we create the solutions to ensure that you get there. It's a step-by-step process, like anything in life.
Okay. I mean, look, it's been wonderful talking to you, and I've got so many other questions I could ask you, but I know we're kind of short of time. But I guess the book is a fantastic read, and it really captures a lot of things. Because I think a lot of people think that family wealth is just about getting the right wills drawn up and having the money put in the right place, and that's what I think so many people think that. And what you're doing is you're really shattering that illusion, and you're providing a lot of services that are nothing to do with traditional professional financial services. They are to do with getting people communicating better, properly together, getting them to create a structure within the family, getting them to have a vision bigger than the family itself. So these are the kind of things that I found fascinating in the work you're doing and in the book. And again, I think your website's got a lot of great information in it as well. So I'd recommend people do that. Is there anything you'd like to say to people as we sign off here?
funniest thing, reiterating what you just said, Alistair, is I actually had to put on my website that we are not financial advisors. We actually had to communicate that, because like everyone assumes that family, when you speak about family wealth and family prosperity, it's all about financial advice. We're not here to look after the money. We're here to look after the family. That's what we do. That's the service. We let the financial advisors look after the wealth and look after your investments and your funds and whatnot. We're here to look after the family, because that's the most important aspect of your family's legacy, the family in itself.
Okay, awesome. And you know, and it's interesting is one of the 4 fundamentals is preparing the heirs. And I think
Correct.
one of the best ways to prepare first, second, and third, whatever generation you are, is to get them a copy of the book to read.
Couldn't
Because I
agree
think,
anymore.
yeah, exactly. And I think that I can imagine a lot of people with children that are old enough to read the book, those children would benefit a lot from just from reading the book. So you know, that would be my personal recommendation to people listening to this. Get a copy, not just for yourself, but get a copy for the next generation to read.
Another damning statistic, Alistair. No one is born in this world thinking, I can't wait to fail.
Yeah.
I've never seen it. I never seen anyone who says, yes, I can't wait to be addicted to X, Y, and Z. I mean, no one does that, but it happens, and it happens for a reason. And we say prevent. No, prevention is significantly cheaper in terms of emotion, in terms of finance, than waiting for the proverbial to hit the fan and running around trying to find a cure. Don't do it. Go down the prevention route. That's what we're all about. Go down the prevention route. And, if you love your family, if you care about your family, if you want what's best for your family, then please, please, please read the book, or at the very least visit our website and run the assessment. We'd love to work with loads of families.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time, Nicholas. Really appreciate it. And I hope, the people who get this book, well, I'm sure they'll get as much out of it as I've got out of reading it. So, thank you very, very much for your time. And I look forward to connecting with you again soon.
Absolute pleasure, Alistair. Thank you so much. Take care.